especially with regard to kill a Mockingbird, it's really helpful for us to think about the difference between individual mannerisms and culturally or culturally determined manners, and how those come into conflict in this book. How you as a writer might use the distinction between those two kinds of behaviors in your own storytelling. So, mannerisms. I'm using that word to mean those outward gestures or habits that distinguish a character as an individual. Everybody you know has mannerisms that are different from the way that other people, they have little habits that they do that you don't see other people doing. And you know that person, when you see that habit, or if you were to imitate that person, you could do one or two of those little habits and your friends would know who you're talking about, right? If you have a teacher who has a little phrase that he or she uses, 3 times every class period, that's a mannerism that you could then, probably the way I do this is a mannerism, right? And you could imitate me. I hope you won't, but you could, because that's a mannerism. It's a habit when I'm speaking or when I'm teaching. Okay, and there are some great mannerisms in To Kill a Mockingbird. These just small little gestures that make you feel like, oh, I can see that person, and it really gives a clear picture of that person. So we're talking about Mr. Avery, who is boards next door to Scout and Jim. Besides making change in the collection plate every Sunday, Mr. Avery sat on the porch every night and sneezed. Okay, all right. We don't know much about Mr. Avery. He's a very, very minor character. We don't need to know much about Mr. Avery. But look how those two little gestures right there. It's almost like you can picture this. I don't really know what this tells us about Mr. Avery. But it doesn't matter, because it just feels like Mr. Avery's a real person, because here's two things that our narrator has observed about him. He makes change in the collection plate, which is funny, right? And then he just sat on the porch every night and sneezed. And then she talks about how they count how many sneezes he can do. All right, this isn't major stuff, right? This isn't super important. And as I said, Mr. Avery's a very minor character. He doesn't play a big part in the story, but just the fact that we get these two little details about him makes him sort of pop off the page.